2013, I had a life-altering event, and it made me rethink everything that we were doing. And I was like, and when you go through one of those moments, you're like, okay, what's the most important thing to me? So it's family, and then I also like doing good, making an impact in this world. So we loved real estate. Princey actually used to work at a company which is like a Home Depot in Europe. She used to design the kitchens. This was when she was a student. And she always kept insisting that real estate is something that we should invest in.
Hey guys, welcome again to another great episode of Breaking Resistance. I'm here today with our very own John Azar. Hey John, how's it going?
Hello. Welcome everybody for another episode, and I'm really excited about this one. I have the pleasure of having one of the greats in our, not only in our industry, but just an amazingly nice guy. And I can't speak highly of Vikram Brar. Welcome to our podcast. Welcome to the episode. And I will let you do your own introduction, but thank you for a great.
Yeah, don't steal his thunder. Let give.
I'm not.
Chance.
Yeah, I'm not. I just laid the red carpet. That's all.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for the kind words. Good to see you again, John and Francisco. Thank you for the invite, and hello everybody else. Listening to us. Thank you for your time as well. So I'm Vikram Brar. Just little background. Founder of Baja Capital. A multifamily, vertically integrated multifamily firm, with a focus on Arizona market. However, on the other side, on the personal side, so I, talking about just a few years ago, not too long, I was born and brought up in India. I grew up over there. My father was in the army, so I had the opportunity of being surrounded by very highly motivated people. For me, that was a norm. As a kid, you don't know any different. So, you're meeting with that crowd. So that played it had a lot of influence over my growing up, my mindset.
Wait. Let's take a breather. So what, your dad was in the military, or did you say, where's the military?
My dad was in the army.
Your dad was in the army.
Okay. My dad was in the army. So, Indian army, and in India, on the peacetime, wherever there's not, if you're not at the borders, you're kind of with your family, with your parents at a base. So I literally grew up all my younger life. I grew up pretty much on base.
Wow.
So that was
great. Where was
that?
What part of India was that?
So it was mostly northern. Northern India is where I was. Like, it was every 3 years you move, and it's 3 years or 2 years. So we were moving every 3 years. So I grew up in the northern area of India. Pretty much everything from border to border. I've seen Punjab on one side, and then Arunachal Pradesh, which is the corner with China. And so that's kind of been the breadth. So it was amazing. And we were in central India for a very short period of time. So from there, I wanted to join the army. My father was like, hey, you've pretty much kind of lived a secondary army life. Why don't you look at engineering? I had that engineering curiosity in me, more mechanical-esque. So that took me to engineering college, and I did my bachelor's in industrial engineering over there. And, at that time I was like, okay, I want to do master's. Like, I loved industrial engineering. It was a great mix of mechanical plus management. So that brought me to automotive, over in Wayne State, Detroit, is where I did my master's in industrial engineering. So from there, I spent, a few years in the automotive industry. Absolutely loved what I did. It was, learning about Lean Six Sigma processes, how to enhance, how to build scalable processes, how to build something that can withstand time, that can withstand different pressures. So that was, I think, in my educational life, in my, on the formal side, that's what built my base. Where my personal life, the base was built living on a base in India. And here in my professional career, I think the automotive industry really built my base. So from there, Princey and I had, my wife, Princey, who's also a co-founder. So we had met back in India. She had gone to London for her master's. I'd come to US for mine. So we were, together all this time. So we got married. And then when she came over, she got a job in the Valley, in the Silicon Valley. So, organically, I kind of joined her because it was her dream. Like, ever since, even when we were back in India, whenever we talked about, what do you want to do as you grow up? She always said, I want to be in the Silicon Valley. She could do all the designing, like web. She was always.
So wait, you grew up with your wife? You grew up like you guys were childhood buddies?
Not childhood, but engineering, like college buddies, you can say. Like
college
we had
buddies.
common
Okay.
friends. We had different colleges. We were in different colleges, but we had common friends. So we were fortunate enough to spend last couple of years of college together. And so
okay.
Awesome.
So from there,
wow.
Yeah.
She,
you don't often really hear that. I mean, like you're with your wife, even from back from like another country that you grew up in, and then just to both have the same ambitions and the same dreams for you guys to come over here and to be able to accomplish that. Like that's amazing.
Right. And did you guys both decide that you wanted to come to the United States together at that point, or was it like more of like she got accepted into a program and you guys moved here, or how did that come about?
No, we were both vibing for it. Like we were both going for US. Like, but as an I'm not sure. Like, so as an immigrant, what I'll tell you is like from in India, when trying to get a visa, it's a draw of luck. It's not like you get into the best university, you're automatically going to get a visa. There's a whole thing that you have to go through that is completely out of your control. So she had that. She had colleges in England lined up.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I'm Middle Eastern. I think whatever process that you went through to get a visa, I can assure you my process was a little harder to get a visa.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure, and I'm talking back at the time when if you had an appointment, you had to go stand, like you didn't have, I think it was before appointments, you had to go line up at 4 a.m. outside the embassy.
Oh, yeah. I did that.
To get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we did that. I remember that was one of my earliest memories is going into the embassy and standing before the sun came up, at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning to stand in line to even get an audience with the I guess the person who was dispensing visas. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I know it was in that draw of luck. I got through. She got to England, and I used to hop across the pond when I was over in Detroit before we got married. So then we decided to come over to US and kind of called it our home. So she came over and she found the job in the Valley first. Obviously, she's a smarter one. And I followed through Deloitte supply chain strategy. I worked with the management consulting supply chain strategy for a little bit, but then my true calling is still manufacturing operations. So then I pivoted to startups in the Valley over here, med devices, bleeding edge technology, leading the operations team, building the scalable processes, and I loved it. It was that whole entrepreneurial experience. You're building something that is going to last. That's going to, you're going to have real impact in this world. So essentially, that's what I did. And back in 2013, I had a life-altering event, and it made me rethink everything that we were doing. And I was like, and when you go through one of those moments, you're like, okay, what's the most important thing to me? So it's family, and then I also like making an impact in this world. So we loved real estate. Princey actually used to work at a company which is like a Home Depot in Europe. She used to design the kitchens. This was when she was a student, and she always kept insisting that real estate is something that we should invest in. We always wanted to work together. However, when you come to US as an immigrant, you're not in control of what you can do because you have a visa situation until you get the green card, you get all those things resolved. So once that resolved, we started, we were like, okay, this is a great opportunity. Let's go ahead. And
was this life-altering event just for you, or this is related to your wife?
No, it was for me. I had an autoimmune disorder, which was I was totally fine, which was diagnosed in early years when I came to US. So I struggled through it and lived through it for the last 10 years. At that time, 10 years. And then essentially the medications ran out. There had to be surgery done, and it was a major operation. It was done at Stanford, one of the best hospitals, whatever else. But things happen. Some complications happen. Some things happened during the surgery that were not supposed to happen, and I almost didn't make it. So let's say I'm just fortunate enough to be given the second chance at life.
Wow! Yeah, that's amazing.
So as you can imagine, that really makes you think hard about what you're doing here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're still with us.
No, me too. Me too. So essentially from there, we said, okay, we love real estate. And I was at the startups at this time. I'd been seeing what's happening in the Valley, housing, multifamily construction, in general is our 21st century challenge, right? So much so that McKinsey and guys like top business consulting firms have special panels set up for this research going on. World Economic Forum has a dedicated section that talks about us, talking about the challenges and how to address them. And there were startups popping up. If you look at it, there's a lot of startups that are happening around this whole construction, housing to resolve this problem in the Valley. And I was fortunate enough to be able to see a couple of them and see something else and see how I could leverage my Lean Six Sigma background to really truly have an impact on this field. And the beauty is you earn time. Like we had young kids. My kid was, we have two younger kids. They were just the older one was just born at that time. And so that was also part of this rethinking what is more important and everything. So all these combined together, for us, it was like multifamily was the way to go. Like you have an impact. Housing is a basic necessity. Yeah, we go back to, my earlier childhood in India, they used to talk about three things: housing, food, and clothing, right? Those are your basic necessity. India was still struggling from the freedom. Like my parents were more like the first generation after freedom. And the basic necessity they were all talked about is like, let's focus on food, shelter, and clothing. So for us, those fundamentals are ingrained. So I came in, I was like, those are the basic things. So and if we get an opportunity to impact something that is so essential to humanity, why not? And so that is where we started multifamily. We looked at the markets. We studied up. We looked at the markets. We found Tucson on a day's flight in and out, late to the recovery cycle. A lot of job growth coming in, like typical great fundamentals that we all look at during the multifamily. So we went in with our own capital. We bought an asset, and right from the get-go, we were very intentional. We were vertically integrated. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to put in best quality materials for the housing to make sure that the tenants, the working class that is going in gets the best quality materials, low emission or free emission. Yeah. And at the same time, the investor hat on, we wanted to make money.
Let me interrupt you there, and I'm sorry, Vikram, because I don't want to slow your roll there.
I can go on.
That was a quick. It has to be one of the quickest in the chronology of a life that we've had on our podcast. Like 11 minutes, we just went through like 45 or 50 years of life. That's pretty good. That's impressive.
Yeah. No. What I want to do is, because these things are important. These things are important, especially for our audience, because what you having that life-changing moment and event happening in 2013, and then wanting to kind of jump in with your wife into real estate. Now, most of our folks, and I know from some of our audience, they really don't know the direction of where they're going to go when they're breaking into real estate. So where exactly did you start? I know you wanted to get into multifamily, but what did you do for you to start getting?
Well, I mean, I'll break it down even. I'll go even a little further. Why would you even pick multifamily? I mean, real estate has many facets to it. Why did you pick multifamily?
No, for sure. And rightfully so. It was not like multifamily was not the first real estate investment. So as I mentioned, Princey always had this, bent about building. Like Princey and I, both of us are very, very big on creating something, building something, right? So that is something that is core to our beliefs. So when she was working and designing back in England in those days, so she was doing all this housing, interior kitchens and everything else. So she was building those out. And in 2010, we were in the Valley, right? Right now, it looks like the best time to buy the house. Like it was all intentional. But at that time, we had not realized this was the bottom of the market. We bought a house 2009. And we essentially, Princey and I, single-handedly did most of the renovations in the house. That exposed us to what goes on into the housing side, into the renovations, what you can do with design. We took a mint 1954 house and made it open concept and latest, finishings and everything else. And you can turn it into something really, really beautiful where people want to live, right? That's very desirable. And it has great products in it. So that's where essentially I would say our mindset got to real estate and what you can do with it. It's just like a startup, right? You go in, you create something and you have an exit. So from there, in 2013, we knew real estate was a great vehicle. Everybody's heard about it, right? Real estate is awesome. It's a great wealth generator. So we started buying condos in Chicago area, sight unseen. We did the math. I didn't know anything. I didn't know any complicated underwriting sheets or whatever. You take out a pencil, you say, okay.
You know what I mean?
You pen and paper. Here's the. Here's what the expenses is going to be. I wanted to make sure there's about $100-$200 buffer. Then, you go ahead and you pull the trigger.
Exactly.
And so we bought the houses. I knew the general area because my sister's over there. However, we never went to those locations. Numbers mattered, and we found a really great realtor. So we bought a couple condos in 2013 and then 2014. And then very soon realized the scalability issue with that model, right? So we were like, okay, everybody talks about this, but definitely I cannot imagine single family being that vehicle. So there's got to be something different. So I said the next best thing we know is research, right? So we started researching, found bigger pockets, found books, read about different asset classes. So essentially found commercial from bigger pockets, and I knew commercial, like we knew right away we were on something good. And then as we started going through different asset classes within the commercial, multifamily stood out again as a basic necessity, right? Yeah. It's a basic necessity. It's we have less of what is needed, the basic economics 101 matched. We knew personally what we could do with it. We knew what, we already had that bent. Princey had the designing, bent already. I'd been doing manufacturing operations for almost 20 years. So we were like, okay, this makes sense. And we read Dave Lindell's book. We should give him a plug because
I've read some of his books actually.
Multifamily Millionaire, I believe. It lays it out very layman. It just lays it out and says this is what you need to do, and here's what it is. And for me, it was like, okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Did you ever do any of his events?
There was a conference that he had over here, like where I think it used to be called boot camp, I believe. So we went to the boot camp, and I essentially, because I was the one who was reading up all these books and I'm doing a lot of research and sharing everything with Princey, but I dragged her into that thing so she could, without even having to go through all the books and everything, she can get it firsthand. So we went through it, and we went through the boot camp, and then she was like, yeah, makes sense. Everything is great. So that was, I think it was a weekend stuff that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. I've heard David. I've actually read his books. I've never gone to his events, but read his books. I mean, that was when I was first getting started, started kind of diving into it. So 2013, 2014, probably around the same time as you did, where I started to really want to know more about commercial real estate as opposed to just being a realtor and helping buy and selling houses and then trying to flip and all that stuff. I really wanted to just break into the commercial real estate space, and he was probably like my first direction. So
yeah, no, right.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, Dave Lindell has been influential in our space for many, many years. I mean, it's even my brother Tony got his start with some of David Lindell stuff. So he's he's like the elder statesman in our industry to some extent. Before all these coaching programs were, all this coaching stuff and all this great stuff, and all these gurus podcast now that are come out. And he was like the first multifamily guru,
the pioneer.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm going to back up a little bit and go back quite a few years in what you described to us in your background. When you were in India, obviously you grew up and moved around with your dad a lot. That must have been hard. I mean, there's got to be some, but you have to have developed some mental toughness, knowing, we share some commonality. I mean, I grew up in overseas as well. And I grew up in a time of war. So there's, not that I'm saying there was any war in India where I grew up, but moving around and anywhere, even in the US, has its own challenges. And as a kid
especially as frequently as you said you did. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. As frequently as you said, what was the hardest part of that for you? I mean, when you were a kid, what was some hardships in that?
So I think they're talking about two sides. So just taking a look at the outside the family stuff, right? So let's talk about like if it was the friends, like we all form good bonds as you're younger, you get these great friends, and suddenly all of a sudden you got to get up and leave, and it's not like you have too much of a time to process that. You have a few months, and you're like, okay, I got to move, like. And then you're like, what is going to happen to my friends? Like, these are my best buddies. This is all I know about my life, right? They're the best friends, and you got to leave them all behind. So, and the concept of this is our house, this is whatever, whatever you're associating your life with, it changes, very fast. So the first few moves are definitely very difficult. Like they're on your mind. Like you're like, oh my God, you're tearing your world apart from your friends. And then, over the years, what happened was it actually, what we ingrained out of it is like, you can make new friends. You can still stay in touch with the old ones. And this was before Facebook and stuff. So we used to write those old snail mails, and I would be still in touch with them. Actually, I found them on Facebook now after many, many years. But, you would stay in touch, you would make new friends, and then exposed you to, like, you learn something new from different place every single time. So you'll start looking at the positives more. That is definitely one of the big things. And talking about the family, I know you touched upon the war. So there was no active wars during the time my father was, like when I was born and my father was in the army. So he had been to one before, I was born. But then we had a lot of insurgency operations. There were a lot of, every few years, I felt he used to go to different areas where, again, he would get his orders like 2 days, 3 days before. At least that's what he, told us. I'm not sure if they were, prior to that. But you started learning that your father's leaving, and you're not sure if you'll see him again. To be very honest, you kind of realize that after a while. But then after the first few times, you're so used to it. You're like, yeah, dad's gone. He'll come back. Things that you learn to be more resilient. You learn to look at the positive sides. You learn to focus on, he is going to come back. You don't have to focus on, is he going to not come back or not? So, those are the few things that teach you about life. It teaches you about organization, how you move, like how you can pack up and move, your entire house every 3 years or 2 years. It teaches you about organization, how to pack stuff, how things go together. I'm pretty sure in my lean manufacturing stuff, and when I built out all these processes and stuff, that has a lot to do with it, because we had boxes assigned for specific things, and things went in certain places, and that was it.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense now that you're telling me about your background, why you went into supply chain and manufacturing and all that. I mean, so that's a natural part of moving around as much as you did,
right.
and
yeah.
The other side that I wanted to ask you about, which I would assume, I mean, I probably had very similar issues in moving countries and all that kind of stuff, is, you build this, I don't want to say like this barrier, but I don't know if you had that or not, but you seem like very, very, personable and friendly, and, which is, I would think it's a skill that you had to work to keep, because moving around, almost as a child, will teach you like, hey, maybe it's not safe to be as close to people as I should, because I may lose them, or I'm going to be gone. They're going to be gone out of my life in a couple of years, because I shouldn't build that deep of relationship and deep connection. So, but you seem to embody something else. I mean, you're very, very nice. So I'm just saying, I get the feel like you must have had to develop some very lovely skills to maintain through your lives, as opposed to being off-putting and like, cold.
Right. Yeah, no, it's you said it right. There's two outcomes of these situations where you have to move, where you're for a short term. You can either be very intentional and still engage at the core level, or you can be superficial, knowing I'm going to move, it doesn't matter to me, so I'm just going to do whatever I need to do for the couple of years. So sure. In entirety, I'm not 100% certain, what causes a person to go either ways, but I can share is in my life, I think it was always, our parents were very intentional, saying like making sure when you make a relationship, it's meaningful. It's something, you're more giving. That's a culture too. We learned that. It's like, and I come from the region of Punjab. So we grew up sharing our houses with strangers, making sure if somebody walks in through the door, they're fed, they're taken care of. Even the religion is around that. So for us, it was like whenever we engage with somebody, whether it's for 5 minutes or whether it's for an hour. So we make sure it's a true engagement, true conversation, or we don't.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Yeah. And that's exactly what I think. That is correct. You're absolutely right about that, because I grew up in the same way. And no, you cannot. That's not something that you develop. I think it's something in the DNA, to be honest with you, or just
right.
I think maybe it's a combination, because you grew up in a surrounding where you're taught to be intentional, even if, as you said, even if you're in contact
right.
with somebody for 1 minute, you have something right. very meaningful, and meaningful connections don't have to mean the equal of time. Time does not mean
right.
equal, meaningful connections. Right. You can have a meaningful connection with somebody you spend an hour with, or 20 minutes with, or even 5 minutes. I mean, I've had meaningful connections with people I met for 15, 20 minutes, in an airport, and I had a meaningful connection with them, so, it's all about how you view it, in your mind, and what kind of meaningful connections that means to you, that you can keep. It's an amazing skill to keep through a lifetime. And I see that in you for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm just happy we all have it, and that's what keeps us human.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I absolutely. I think all of us in this, on all three of us have very probably similarities in that. And I see it in Francisco. And
no, for sure. I know it for sure. Like we've been, I've known you for the last, couple of years now, probably, a little over a year, maybe. So, and it's never been we have never been transactional. We always had, whatever the thing was, we always had those true, meaningful conversations. And I think that's why we are sitting here too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, listen, transactions come and go, meaningful connections don't come about,
stay forever.
All the time.
Yeah.
And they stay a lot longer. They have much more length and longevity than just transactional relationships. Absolutely.
Correct.
So you when you moved to the United States, because this is obviously, Francisco probably knows where I'm going with this, because I am, as an immigrant, I'm always curious as everybody else's immigrant experience. When you first moved to the United States, obviously this was another move, and yet obviously a string of moves for you that you've had in your lifetime. But this was a different move. This was a move that you drove, that was intentional by you. That's that which makes it different, right? How did it feel, moving here? What was that experience like? Because that was a completely different type of move for you.
Right. No, it is definitely, it's a very unique move. It was the first time I was, I wouldn't say first time I was just by myself, but pretty much, because even in the past, when I went to the undergrad college, it was close by. It was a couple hours, drive from home, whenever we wanted, we could just go back home. Here, when you fly, it's pretty much a one-way ticket, when you're coming in. You don't know when you're going to go see your family. There was nobody that I knew in the area from a family perspective. I had a couple of friends in college that I had, so that was the best part. But again, when you come in, everybody's got their journey. Everybody's so focused on life. It's not like you're coming into an established household. It's not like you're coming into a country knowing what it is. We drive on the wrong side of the road, right? For crying out loud, it's like completely foreign. Not intended, but it's a completely different thing. You're in a completely new environment you've never been in. It is very unique. You don't know the languages, your pronunciation, your even though you're speaking English, it's a different English. It doesn't matter. Like half the people can't even understand. More than half the people cannot even understand what you're trying to say. It is very difficult. It is. However, what I believe is, because of moving around all these years and being through some of the tough situations that we had been, I was very focused. So it was, I'm very great at breaking down things and saying, okay, what is the next thing that is required? So the next thing is, I need to find a room. I had a couple of buddies who were there. It's like, who can you hook up? You talk to them and say, who can help or who is looking? So you find those. Then you're like, I don't have a car. Like you're walking and you're in downtown Detroit, and the closest, place where you can go find furniture is probably like 5-6 miles away. How do you do that? And so, very fast, you have to get acclimated to the city, to the people, start building connections, start building, so that you can request people to, help you out in that situation. And I think that's what we're doing. And there's a burning desire, right? It was my decision to come out and do it. It was intentional. So you have that thing to go back to. This is it right now. Many years later, I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and they talk about burning the ships, right? It's like same thing. It's like you've already left 2000 your country behind, everything behind. There's no way out. You got to be successful, and you do what needs to be done.
Yeah. There's no going back.
There's no going back. I didn't have money to go back to India.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel you, man. I feel you. It was the same way for me. I have more of a bigger reason not to go back, because I had military service. If I had to go back, I would have gotten put in jail. So for skipping out on military service. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's fantastic. What when you first came to the United States and you did all these transitions, obviously you made your way into college, and what do you think was the most striking aspect of being in the United, that you had to get used to being in the United States? Like one thing that you're like, shit, I can't believe they do it this way here, or I can't believe, these people act this way, or I can't believe, like, I have, like, I have access to, I don't know, 20 different kinds of cereal, whatever your immigrant experience happened to be like,
John's got some amazing, John's got some pretty cool experiences.
I think we got to dig a little bit deeper in there. There's something more, John.
Me and cereal go a long way. I have an interesting relationship with cereal. Yeah. Okay.
No, if we hit upon, like, if I had one word to describe everything, all different things that kind of you just mentioned, I think it's the abundance, right? Abundance is one thing that, I was so, like, I couldn't wrap my head, like, how can everything be so abundant, right? Whether it's food items, whether it's freedom to say what you want to say, whether it's freedom to do what you want to do. Even though I grew up in India, which is, not the Middle East, but still, it's not like it's largest democracy, but it's not really, if you go back, it's still socialist in a lot of ways. There's certain things you can say, there's certain things you can do. So for me, those were the big things. And you could become what you wanted to. You started hearing about all these people. You read the names in the colleges, you go across a building, X person's buildings, his name is in front, and you're like, and you start reading them about them, and they were like in first generation, they did that, and they were able to give back to the colleges. So the abundance is the word I would use, is like what I was truly amazed about, and thankful to God that I landed in a country which had that and those principles.
That's amazing. That is. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. I think that's a perfect word to describe. Even my feelings, even involving cereals. I think abundance is definitely a good description of what I felt, because I felt like there was everything in abundance. I mean, to me, like, I joke about the cereal, but like, food was never as abundant as abundantly available, in where you and I grew up, toys, clothing, choices of shoes, choices of, there was like 20 different kinds of everything, 50 different kinds of everything, where we grew up, you go to one place and you get a shoe, or you get, you get a fruit, or we go to another stall and you get a produce, you don't get it all in one place,
Right.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a plethora of options that you have here. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a huge culture shock.
Yeah. No, I know Princey uses his word in somewhere else, but to borrow her words, you could have things you want versus you need. That's another differentiator. Yes. It's like you have options to want 100%. Something. Maybe you want the shoe in red color. You can get it.
Yeah. Well, I that's also unfortunately one of the virtue of consumerism that we have these days. That is probably a little too much want. As a
little too much too. Like there's like everything else. There's good and bad, right? And it's but as long as there's more good than more bad,
of course. Yeah. Of course, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And switching gears here, Vikram. Switching gears here. Just kind of going back into your journey. You're breaking into real estate. You attended some events with Dave Lindell, read some books, met some people, networked. What was probably your biggest hurdle, your biggest challenge when you were breaking into the Arizona market after doing all your studies and essentially starting a company, being vertically integrated? Most sponsors, most operators that we know hit certain inflection points, as John likes to say, I like to steal his words, certain inflection points in your business of when is the right time for you to essentially start moving things in-house, start being vertically integrated. Right. You just right off the bat, you jump right into it. What was the biggest challenge of that for you getting started into the commercial real estate space?
Right. So great question. Outside of the very, just very basic stuff. So just breaking into the market, you finding a market itself is a challenge, right? So it's once you find that market and everything else where you want to invest. So we were, so and I have this, because of engineering background, you may call it, like we have this focus, like we go drill down and then we focus on one thing, like you say, take out the shiny object. So we were like, when we decided we we're going to focus on Tucson, I'm not looking at Phoenix, I'm not looking at Seattle, I'm not looking at Florida. Everybody could be doing great. I'm like hyper focused in that one area. So, so that helped because, we try to weed out all the other shiny objects because Phoenix is a great market, much larger market from that perspective as well. However, since we had done our initial analysis, we knew the yields were a little bit higher at that time. And then Tucson had not recovered yet. You had more margin of error, right? We were starting something new. We had to minimize the risk on ourselves. And we knew that market had a little bit more leniency towards that risk, So we got in. I think the biggest thing is obviously it's the mentality, right? It's the mental block. So we always talk about like it's more if you can achieve it mentally, you can achieve it physically. Physical is not a challenge, right? The challenge is all mental. And so we were like, how do you create time? We had full-time jobs. Princey had a full-time job. I had a full-time job. We had a young kid. Our second one was born by this time before we got into multifamily. So we had 2 young kids. And time was our biggest constraint. It's like, where will we find time to do this? So we, you start reading books, there's Hal Elrod, there's even Grant has that 10X, you take a little bit of things from everything else. And there's many other amazing books that we read along the way. And what we realize is you create time, right? You got to create time. Everybody's given the same 24 hours, but some people do tend to achieve more. And so how do they do it? You start looking at it and you're like, okay, we got to start waking up early. It was pretty darn simple for us. So we started waking up at 4 a.m. Oh, it was a pain. But we got through it after that. It's just like clockwork. So we knew we could, before 7 a.m., we had 3 hours before the kids woke up and we had to go get ready for our jobs. So we created that time. And in the evening, we knew they were going to go off to sleep at 8 or 9 when they're younger. So you have another 2-3 hours of time after that to go put towards the business. We were very hyper-focused. We were not drinking alcohol. We were not, going to parties. We were not traveling anywhere. We were just like, this is it. It's a passion. We're going to go conquer this thing and get it done. So that's how we created time. And I think it was and as soon as that mental block lifted that there is time. You gotta just wake up early, sleep a little bit less for a few years.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
You get it done. And then something for our entire audience to get from all these nuggets that Vikram just mentioned, put in the work. Just put in the work. Right. Because that's really the everyone's looking for what's the secret sauce? How did you get there? How did you become so big? What did you do? You put in the work. As simple as that.
Or you put in the work and you make the time to put in the work.
That putting in the work means putting in the time. There's no substitute for it. You hear it from all the greats. You even hear it from Kobe Bryant. We'll even speak on it. Today is Mamba Day. Okay, so I'll use him as an example. Kobe always talked about it. He's all like, you can train twice a day, but if you wake up at 4 a.m., I can train up to 6 times a day. I can double my productivity, almost triple my productivity if I just put in the work by waking up early. And that's exactly what you did. And that's just, if anybody's going to take something out of that, is put in the work, make the time. There's just really no excuses. Because you still having a full-time job and still and had your kids, still able to put in the work. It speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. There's no shortcut for hard work, right? It all boils down to hard work, and that's what it is. Everybody talks about smart work, it's always the buzzword, but smart work comes later. You got to do hard work first before you can start thinking about it.
Sleeves, baby.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Oh yeah, smart work is the luxury you get after you put in the hard work. After you put in the work, not the other way around. So But unfortunately, a lot of people just want the shortcut and want the smart work, and it is what it is. It is what it is. That's human too. You get what you get out of whatever you put into it. So right. It is that's how it goes. Yeah. That's fantastic. These are some great nuggets, man. I have one question for you that I want to follow up to Francisco. What was the hardest lesson for you that you've learned that you can say you look back now and you say, man, that was probably maybe the hardest and best lesson that I've had? What would you say that is?
hardest and best lesson I would say is definitely focus on the process. More you can vertically integrate, more you can do that, and cash flow, so that you drive towards cash flow. At the end of the day, we all talk about cash is king. We can all say that. I kind of know what it is, but unless you have been in that situation where your property is not performing, you're sitting at 20% occupancy, and you're like, okay, my plan was to get to another 10, 20, 30% occupancy right now. The first one was distress, so that's why I'm bringing up a 20% occupancy. And it did teach me the difference between value add and distressed properties. And so I think
I bet.
Yeah, is to have that buffer, right? Is to build in that buffer, build in even that extra planning. And we're always like, you're trained as an immigrant coming overseas, we are always trained to see worst case scenarios. And what it taught me in business is not only see the worst case scenarios, put another buffer behind it. Because then there's the business variability that can happen and market variability that could happen behind it. And just a human variability. You might not be able to find people, somebody might be sick or something else had happened. So that also exposed me. I think it exposed me that on the cash purpose, you got to make sure that cash is there as a reserve is there. And then you got to know your processes. You got to know the details. You got to be in the weed of things to be really successful. We will have the luxury of not being there when we are, way ahead. Like even if you talk about Elon right now, he was in Fremont over here sleeping on the factory floor. Does a billionaire need to do that? Probably not, right? But he knows that's where the success is. He's not done yet. Yeah, he might be a billionaire on paper or stocks or whatever, but he's truly, to make the business successful, to make Tesla successful, to make SpaceX, you've got to put in that hard work. Similarly for our businesses, we got to put in the hard work. You've got to be in the details. You cannot say, here's a property manager, here's what I've given you this thing, here's my property, go drive, right? You buy a Mercedes and you give the keys to somebody who just learned how to drive and or just who knows driving, probably doesn't know the ownership behind the vehicle,
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, I'm gonna have to steal that one from you, Vikram. The put in a barrier behind the worst case scenario. I like that. I like that. Put in another scenario behind worst case scenario.
Yeah.
That is. I would have to steal that line right there. That is good.
No,
that
I'm
is
sure.
a good one.
I'm sure we all have experienced that, in our businesses as we grow.
No, absolutely. Worst case scenario is just the first step. The other step is what comes after worst case scenario.
What comes after worst case scenario?
Exactly.
And that really helped us, because in 2020, when things were really going south and everything else, we actually got aggressive and we pulled in a business plan on a couple of the units, just because we started doing this and we learned it out back in 2017 when we first started. So actually for COVID, even though the market Arizona did really well, however, there was still delinquencies, there were still cash flow issues, there were still, the payments were, even though the government were distributing, rent assistance, but it was not right away. It was a big, moving that money was not easy. But because we had this lessons learned back in 2017, we were able to do really well within the pandemic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a testament to you, man. Awesome. That's great. That is fantastic. Francisco, it's almost time for your speed round.
Yeah, it is. So it's fire round time. So we're already getting close to the end of the episode. So we just like to kind of just ask either they're random, they're questions that we just like to ask you and just to kind of get your feedback on. But for one, I'll go ahead and I'll get started. What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Worst piece of advice that I've ever received. Buy a course from a guru.
Wait,
I like it.
Doing that now?
Use your brain, man. Use your brain. We're all blessed.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. What is the best piece of advice you've received?
Stay in your lane. I was talking to, there's so many within real estate. There's so many different verticals, like even within multifamily, within value add multifamily. There's so many different things that you can do with the product. And you could within asset classes and everything else. So I was talking to somebody very, very smart and, with a 20-year experience in this field. And I was saying, hey, this latest trend this is what's happening right now. And maybe we're looking into it. And the person was like, he gave me just one answer. He said, if I give you one advice, stay in your lane. He said, do what you're good at, and don't look at all these different things. Yeah, always stay on the market to make sure whatever you're in is good. It's not going to go away. However, if that is good enough, then focus on that. Build your niche.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that is great, because you can't be a master of everything. Nobody can be a master of everything.
Nobody can be. Yeah.
And
there are 20 different ways to make money. There are 20 ways to do the things. Pick the thing that belongs to you, do it good, and you'll be fine.
Be great at just one thing. Yeah. Rather be a jack of all trades. No, I like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Another question. What's the meaning behind wahi?
Meaning behind why? It's something very, very close to us. Being a Punjabi, it's a Punjabi word. It essentially means a power that brings you from darkness to light. So, it's very close to us. As I said, we wanted to make sure, we name the company something that is very meaningful, that we look up to. Like every single time we say, well, hey, we know what the guiding principle is, what everything is. And it is something in our core beliefs as well. So everything we do, whether it's renovation, products we buy, the properties that we buy, what we want to do, the business plan that comes together, as I say, is like everything, there's distractions, and there's easier way of doing things, as we were discussing before, but they might not necessarily be the right ways to do things. So, this keeps us, motivated towards always doing the right thing and continuing to improve and shed light over areas we don't know. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
I like that.
I love that.
Man,
I love it.
That's even a better story than our name, man. We have to, that's pretty good. I love that.
Your guys
have to rethink our name. Nah, just kidding.
No.
No, I love it. I love it.
That's good stuff.
So for the listeners, I'm sure everybody knows, but for the listeners, if you might want to shed light on Peak 15.
Yeah, no, Peak 15 is easy. I mean, it's not as deeply ingrained as your name is. Peak 15 is just is the topographical name to Mount Everest before it was named Mount Everest.
Right.
So it's Mount Everest. Mount Everest was named in 1865 by an Indian, a British Indian computer. At the time, they called him computer, which does not stand for the same thing as it stands today. Computer back then was an actual person. So so that computer, found the Peak 15 as a calculated Peak 15 to be the highest peak in the world, and it was later named Mount Everest.
Right, and there's a beautiful documentary on Netflix I think it's called Peak 15 or Mounting Summits. Like I think it's something about Peak 15.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, man, we should make it our company movie.
You should check it out. Like it's really motivating. It's talks about really awesome stuff. Yeah.
Okay. No, man, I have to look into it.
They should have contacted us for sponsorship or something.
Yeah, I know.
I would have given him an extra couple $100 for a sponsorship.
Just kidding. That would have been your chance. You could have done the video over at Base Camp, John.
Yeah. I could have been a contender.
Vikram, it's been an absolute. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one last question. I know you're an avid reader. What is a good book that you've read recently? Doesn't have to be something you're reading now. Just a really good book that stuck out to you.
There was a really good book that stuck out. I think it was about outliers. It's called Outliers. I forget the author.
Oh yeah, I know Outliers.
Yeah. So
it's Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes. We were over in Europe over the summer, and we were waiting for a train. I went to the bookstore and I saw it, and I was like, okay, what's the books I haven't read? And I started reading it, and it's amazing. It goes back to the fundamentals, like engineering-esque. Data, how you club the data, how you start seeing what's behind the outliers. Yeah, of course, definitely recommend it. It's a good read.
Yeah, I love that book. I have that. Yeah, absolutely, good stuff, man. Well, Vikram, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We really appreciate the time and a lot of the things that you put into this episode.
Vikram, thank you so much. How can our audience find you?
Sure. Social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Vikram Brar or BajaCapital.com. And, you can reach out to me and, I would love to connect with anybody and help any way I can.
Awesome.
What's one last question? What is coming up for Wahi Capital that we can help you, that you want to say? You know, is there any announcements that Wahi Capital has or anything like that you guys have coming up?
Sure. No, for sure. So we've been, as all of us in this multifamily field have been looking at this whole interest rate and the recession, whatever else we're looking at it. And everybody's looking at that. But honestly, most of us are looking at the opportunity that is bringing, right? So we are focused on what is going to come in as you know, an opportunity that we haven't seen in a long time. And we're preparing, we're getting ready to launching our fund. And so the idea would be same thing, like being very intentional. We are very intentional in our properties, what we want to buy, where we want to buy, whatever else. So now the idea is to have that capital ready to deploy. Obviously, there's you know, obvious benefits for the investors, like de-risking. You know, it's not a single project. You're not getting with tax implication every time we do a sale and purchase. However, there's another benefit. Like for us, the benefit is like we'll have that capital ready to deploy. And B, we can actually be aggressive and get good deals in what's going to be a great market to buy very soon.
That's great. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So wahicapital.com is the website, and Vikram Brar is our champion of the day. Thank you so much, Vikram.
Yeah,
again,
apart from being
so much
an amazing operator, you're an amazing human. Thank you so much for being on with us, Vikram. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Francisco. Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Guys.
Pleasure's in all mine.
Until the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.